Good afternoon. We will join and we will start the webinar in just a few minutes. We see a lot of people joining right now, and that's great. We're happy to see familiar faces, but we're also very glad to see a lot of new friends. And just want to say a few words before we officially start that this is our fourth webinar. We do it monthly. And we are sharing information about our organization, about partners, about other topics that are important, and especially the topics that are about Ukraine and the war that's going on. And we want to continue to bring attention to the war in Ukraine, and we want to continue inform all of you about our projects, but also about projects of our partners and any other initiatives that are important for Ukrainian victory. So with this, I would like to introduce Allan Mestel and give a little information about who is Allan and how we got to work with him, which I'm very happy. This collaboration really highlighted a lot of work and a lot of efforts that our organization is performing in Ukraine, but also we really want to focus on Ukrainian heroes, whether those heroes are doctors or Ukrainian defenders who are sacrificing their life at the front lines defending Ukrainian independence. And just a few days ago, we celebrated 33rd Independence Day of Ukraine, and all of us are pretty sure that we're going to be celebrating this day moving forward. Ukraine will never surrender. We are all hoping for the victory that will come sooner than later, and so we're doing everything to support Ukrainian people in their path to independence and freedom. And so Allan is a distinguished photojournalist and a documentary photographer, and he now lives in Southwest Florida. He's originally from Canada, and he spent many years in Toronto's advertising industry, and he directed and photographed national and international TV commercials for major advertising agencies there. And his work has earned numerous awards and recognition in Canada. And in 2014, Allan relocated to Florida, where he shifted his focus to photojournalism and opened a commercial photography studio. And he began capturing powerful images that have been featured in exhibitions all across the United States, Europe, and United Kingdom. His work focuses on human rights and social justice, and oftentimes it highlights the life of migrants and refugees. And he documented the migrant crisis at the US-Mexico border and the refugee situation in Ukraine. And his work was published by major media outlets such as USA Today, CNN, NBC, and PBS. What Allan will show you today, and you will see that his work is really aims to tell the untold stories of conflict, grief, and resilience. You will see the beauty of Ukraine through Allan's lenses, but also the tragedy that's unraveling right now. He traveled extensively, as I said, and he's been to Ukraine 4 times. And in different locations. And today's webinar will be focusing on his work in Ukraine, and together with the United Help Ukraine. We really hope that you will see from Allan's work what it is to be in Ukraine right now, and how people in everyday life, they have so much to conquer. And everyday life is something that we see the resilience of Ukrainian people, the bravery and perseverance in their fight for freedom. So Allan, again, I'm very grateful for all your work that you're doing to support Ukrainian people, and the floor is yours with your presentation on as a tribute to those unsung heroes of Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Marina. That was Yeah, you really captured for me a lot of the reasons that I decided to go to Ukraine for the first time and then keep coming back. Um, as Marina said, for the last 10 years or so, I've been focused on photojournalism and documentary photography, and almost exclusively in the human rights and social justice arenas. And I have a personal connection to Ukraine in that my grandfather, whom unfortunately I didn't really know, he died when I was quite young, was born in Ternopil, um, left, made his way in the 30s through Europe to the United Kingdom where my father was born. But certainly there is a connection there for me to Ukraine. Um, I in February of 2022, as the whole world did, I was watching, with increasing horror as the buildup of Russian forces on the Ukrainian border began to look more and more as though it was, not just an effort by Putin to find leverage for whatever he wanted to do in Ukraine, but he was actually preparing for a full-scale invasion. And I remember the moment when it was reported on the news that supplies of that field hospitals on the Russian side were being stocked with plasma and whole blood. And I just remember that shiver that went through my spine when I realized there's only one reason that blood is supplied to field hospitals, and that's casualties. And I realized at that point that we were looking at Ukraine becoming under an incredibly a violent assault by the Russians. And Shortly after the invasion began on February 24th, 2022, I just decided to make my way to the border. The refugee crisis was being reported. Millions of women and children primarily were fleeing into Western Europe through all of the border points. And in the first week of March of 2022, I just got a plane to Warsaw, rented a car, and made my way to the border to Medyka, which is the largest border crossing between Ukraine and Poland, and photographed the refugee exodus. That was my first sort of foray into this particular into the Ukrainian conflict. Um, and so Just to sort of give an overview of what you'll see when I show you some images, I've sort of selected some images from all four of my trips. The initial images document the refugee exodus, and I have photographed refugee camps and migrant camps and done that quite extensively prior to this. But I got to tell you that photographing the Ukrainian refugee situation was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Not only the scale of it, but just the emotions of there was so much shock, bewilderment, disbelief, horror, grief. I guess in other situations where I photograph refugees and migrants, there's sort of always been, despite the fact that people are living in hopelessly primitive and difficult circumstances, there's sort of been an undercurrent of hope in that sometimes migrants are looking, there's this hope of perhaps of moving on from where they're coming from to a better existence somewhere else. So none of that happened in Ukraine. It was just pure misery and shock. I stayed at the border for a few weeks, and then almost immediately started making plans to return. I came back to Ukraine in the summer of 2022 in July, and traveled the country, documenting much of the aftermath of the Russian occupation in the northeast, around Kyiv, Bucha, Irpin, and some of the destruction of that the Russians had left in those cities. I returned again in July and August of 2023. Once again, that was I traveled almost 2,300 miles, covering the country, And then, of course, my fourth trip, which is the one that I did in cooperation with United Help Ukraine, was by far the longest and the most intense. I spent 5 weeks, and most of that was split between Kyiv region and Donetsk and Luhansk and Zaporizhia regions. Much of it on the near the front, spending time with the defenders. I was visited a number of different units. I lived with them, traveled with them, and really got a chance to immerse myself in the defenders and their experience on the front. So let me start by sharing my slideshow screen here with you guys, and I'll start going through these and just make some comments on these images. Everyone can see this? I'm successfully shared, I assume?
Yes, we can
Good.
see.
All right. Okay. So there we go. So yeah, so these are images from February 2022 all the way to May 2024. So these initial images are portraits of some of the refugees. This is, as I said, at the border at Medica. People poured across this border by the hundreds and thousands, coming with basically whatever they could carry, just bags, suitcases that they would roll across. This is a lineup of refugees. The Polish army did a fantastic job of trying to keep everybody moving from the border. This is a lineup of people that never seemed to ever end. It was constantly being refilled as people came across the border by car, by bus, by foot, and they were moved out from the border onto buses and trains and moved to other refugee shelters that had been set up elsewhere in the country. One of the things that really impressed me about the response to the invasion was this enormous, decentralized, non-governmental rush to the border by individuals, small nonprofits. Really, people showed up from all over Europe and elsewhere with whatever, with supplies, with offers of shelter, and it was a massive decentralized aid response that was pretty incredible to see. This was a woman who had been searching for food in some of the boxes that had been left by volunteers. Found a package of biscuits. This was a young Polish soldier who was helping out a refugee family who seemed overwhelmed, and she was just rocking that baby in her arms. This is the train station in Shemshil. This is the platform where the international trains where the trains from Ukraine would come in, and the Poles just sort of came to the border with supplies, with clothing, baby carriages, baby carts, and just left them on the platform for people to avail themselves as they got off these trains from Odessa, from Kyiv and Lviv. And this is the platform in Shemshil, and these are just people waiting for trains to take them to Warsaw and elsewhere, where volunteers were assisting in finding shelter for people. This is on the night buses. As I said, as I was in Medica, the flow of refugees was constant day and night, and the buses from the border to shelters in some of the cities close to the border were running day and night, always full. So this was an image from Bucha. Bucha was a very emotionally impactful experience for me. Just seeing the level of devastation that the Russians, this was after the Russians had been pushed out of Bucha, This was representative of what I saw throughout the city, civilian vehicles just riddled with bullets. Obviously, the Russians had just been completely indiscriminate in the destruction. There was clearly the Russians had targeted individual homes, businesses. This was not just sort of crossfire situations. These vehicles and homes had been clearly targeted for destruction, and as we all know, there was enormous human rights violations that took place in Bucha and Irpin. This again is Bucha. This was representative of something I saw throughout Ukraine. I have never seen a country more with more national pride, national spirit on overt display than Ukraine, except maybe the U.S. on the 4th of July. But even there, destroyed buildings, people would climb up to these to the windows and hang the Ukrainian flag defiantly from these buildings, and it was just a show of support for the country and just a show of the fact that Ukraine was going to defy the efforts of Putin to subjugate the country. This was a hospital in Serhivka. I arrived in Serhivka, which is a small town just outside of Odessa that was targeted by the Russians. It's a small resort town. It was hit in the middle of the night in July of 2022 by 2 or 3 missiles that were fired from a ship in the Black Sea, destroyed an apartment building and destroyed a hotel. And these women had been residents of that apartment building that was destroyed. The hotel was hosting students who were celebrating graduation from college, and many of them were killed and many injured, as you'll see. This young man was one of the ones who was injured, obviously badly scarred. His back was a complete mess of shrapnel scars. The green you're seeing is disinfectant that had been painted onto his wounds by the hospital. He's 21 years old. His name is Gleb. This is in Irpin. This woman had been in Venetia in the middle of the country during the initial invasion, and she had just returned to Irpin, and this is what remained of her house when she got there. This woman was in the building in Serhivka next to the one that was destroyed, and her window was blown in, and she was injured by flying glass. And this is a woman who was made homeless in that attack, and she was in a hospital where she was staying. This is in Chasiv Yar. This is Lana Nicole Nyland, who had been a professional dancer in Kyiv. She's a Canadian Ukrainian, and she gave up her dance career to form a nonprofit that runs supplies from warehouses, in the east to the front. She takes supply. She and her organization runs supplies to both military and civilians at the front, and tremendous admiration for her. She's striking a dance pose outside of a theater in Chasiv Yar that was destroyed by a missile that came through the roof. And she's actually recreating a pose that she showed me a photograph of as she struck the same pose on the stage in that very theater before the war, which was just an interesting contrast. This is a young man. He was part of the military administration in Chasiv Yar that was my escort there, and he's in that same theater looking out onto the stage, and that's his hometown. So this was photographed on my last trip in the east, and clearly the contrast of a destroyed Russian tank in front of an Orthodox church. I should note that Orthodox church was riddled with machine gun fire and shells, so that the church itself had been targeted by the Russians. And there's, as a testament to, again, the Ukrainian counterattack and the fact that Russians had been pushed out of these cities, these wrecks of Russian tanks and Russian military vehicles are everywhere and along the in the cities and towns in the east. This is a unit that I spent time with. That's the 93rd Mechanized Battalion. This was actually them training, dismounting from an armored vehicle. And this is the inside of a 172 millimeter self-propelled artillery piece that an old Soviet piece of equipment that is used by actually both the Russians and the Ukrainians. And this was just demonstrating the crew at work. And this is on the front. This is a brigade of the Azov Brigade, a battalion of the artillery, firing. They're firing in support of ground troops that are in the forest that you can see in the background, in Donetsk region.
Can I ask you a question, Alan, since you're
Yeah.
talking about defenders? So what is your experience actually in the front lines? We see those powerful images and we see Ukrainian soldiers, so to say, at work. What was their, how did they view your work? How did they see you as someone standing there taking photographs? What was your interaction with
Well,
Ukrainians?
I was going to talk a little bit more about this, but this may be a good time to talk about it. It was an experience. Being with the defenders on the front lines is something that I think about and I live with every single day. I was the experience of how welcome they made me feel, how open they were to talk to me. They shared their food with me. They made sure that I was that I had a place to sleep. I was incredibly impressed by the morale. There was, despite the fact that almost everyone that I met, they were not professional soldiers. They were civilians who had put aside their civilian lives, and accepted their role as defenders to standing in the breach against the Russian aggression in their absolute determination that Ukraine would continue they would defend Ukrainian sovereignty, Ukrainian culture, the Ukrainian people, and the army. It was unlike what you would expect an army to be. There was, like, on the front, I hardly saw any rank insignia. There was no saluting. Nobody called each other sir. Everybody was on a first name basis. I wouldn't have known who the commanders were unless somebody told me, just because it was, and as when I commented on that, I heard from more than one person that they're a brotherhood. It is a brotherhood of individuals, completely focused on the goal and united in their common cause. Just an incredibly unique experience for me, to be part of that brotherhood. And once again, I'm still in touch on almost a daily basis with more than one of the soldiers that I met. We communicate on Facebook and elsewhere, and it's just the friendships. Being in that situation with people when you're on the front line, it's really incredibly. It's amazing how quickly you bond with people. The bonds were formed, in hours, and bonds that are lasting bonds. I'll give you one example. I was being taken to a frontline position I was with a Special Forces unit, Unit 12, of the 22nd Brigade, and I was in a car being driven out from their forward base in a village near the front to the bunker that they had occupied, that was just a few kilometers behind the front line, where they stayed, and deployed to the trenches. So it was within a kilometer of zero line, and I was in the car, and we stopped at a medical facility, stabilization base, where we were joined by another vehicle that had medics in it, and I assumed that the medics were coming with us to just because that's where they needed to be. But when I asked about that, they said, "Oh no, they're here for you." I mean, they wanted to make sure that if anything happened to me, that medical aid was going to be right there for me, and they came specifically because I was with them, which I was just very touched by. So this is a really good example of the fact. So I was with this sniper unit that was training, and this four-man unit, and of the four men that comprised the sniper unit, one was a lawyer, one was a railroad engineer, one was a metal worker, an iron worker, and this guy was a ballet dancer. And still, he's told me he was still on the roster at a theater in Kyiv. But again, that is completely typical of the fact that these people come from all walks of life. There's no walk of life that isn't sort of represented at the front by these people who have put their civilian lives on hold.
I just want to make a quick comment here as well, Allan, for our viewers, is that this is what you just touched, that that you met people who were not professional soldiers, who had to put their careers, often artistic career, on hold. Like we saw a ballet dancer, opera singers who are continuing to fight. And I just want to bring attention of this audience that we will have an event. There is a famous rock band in Ukraine. It's called Antitila. And they will be here with not just the concert, but a special documentary about them being on the front lines in March and April of 2022, defending Ukraine as paramedics. They actually performed with the U2's Bono and then Ed Sheeran. And their experience, if you talk to them, is that they actually put their military duty first, and then their career as an amazing rock band in Ukraine second. So even they had to perform in London with Ed Sheeran, they had to get the permission from their commander to travel and perform, and then return back, and then get the arms back in their arms, and then continue defending. And so if people are interested, it's going to be a really great documentary discussion and a short concert in Washington, D.C. on September 22nd. And I put the link in the chat. Thank you.
And yeah, and that is very typical of the people that I met. And I would ask, do you plan to go back to this career when it's all over? And people said, we're just not thinking about that. No one is thinking about the future beyond, being in the moment and focusing on the job that they're doing today. This young man is a psychologist. He just graduated from his master's before the war started, and he had been setting up his own practice when the invasion, the full scale started, and he joined up, and his call sign is Freud. So this is the drone unit that I was with. The drone units are just a little bit about the evolution of the war. The commander of this drone unit told me that at the beginning of the war, at the beginning of the full scale invasion, there may have been 10 enemy drones along the front line on any given day. He told me that at the moment in his sector alone, there's 100 drones a day that are launched in his sector by the enemy. Most are these FPV, small first-person view drones that are piloted by operators with sort of VR goggles. This has become the primary. The lines right now are fairly static in the east, or at least they were when I was there. I guess the Russians have made some advances, but the greatest threat to any individual on the front lines at the time I was there were these drones, which are flown by both sides over the front lines, sort of searching for targets. And the guys in this unit, they build their own drones. They have a 3D printer at this little farmhouse that they've occupied in a town just a few kilometers from the front lines. The pilots spend 3 days on post at the front, and then they rotate out and spend 3 days in the lab building drones. They can only spend 3 days on post just because it's so taxing. Spending all that time, basically with a VR headset on flying these drones. Um, and this next slide actually this is in a trench at the zero line.
Alan, you stopped sharing. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Say again?
I don't see your screen right now.
Oh, it says I'm screen sharing.
Can everyone see it? Maybe just me.
I can see a screen.
Yeah, you
can
can.
see it.
Okay, great.
You can see it, yeah. So this is a pilot. This is a little dugout that has been sort of dug off the main trench. It's just a small, underground bunker carved out of the dirt, lined with material that's designed to sort of protect against EM or emissions. He's flying a drone over the front lines with that headset on, and interestingly enough, both sides are able to, at times, depending on what frequency they're operating on, they can tap into the enemy's drones and actually see what the enemy drone pilots are seeing. So right now it's just a game of technological leapfrog. Both sides are working hard to try to outwit the other side with their drone technology, but this war has sort of redefined how this type of war would be fought in the future with drones. This is, the drone component of this war has become such an integral part of what both sides are doing to try and gain an advantage. There's a mortar unit on the front line. Funny story, the unit I was with did not have a full-time press officer. So the guy that escorted me to the front was actually the commander of the drone unit. And I asked him if I could get inside the mortar pit and photograph it while they were firing it. And he told me, yeah, go ahead. So after they fired off a few of these rounds and I got out of that pit, I said to him, do you normally let journalists or photographers get into the mortar pit while it's being fired? And he said, I have no idea. This is actually the first time I've ever seen it being fired because he's the drone guy. So that was fun because it was pretty intense beginning. So this is the heartbreaking stuff. These are military hospitals. This guy was fairly fresh, fairly new into the hospital. Amputations are prevalent. It seems to be one of the, just the type of war with the drones and artillery being the primary weapons that are being utilized right now. There's a tremendous number of limbs being amputated, much more so than I guess you would find if you were sort of in close quarters combat with traditional rifles and whatnot. Sorry, just actually this is out of order. This is the forward operating base that I was taken to. This is only a couple of miles from the zero line. This is where the soldiers on that special forces unit live when they're close to the front. This guy's Anton. Anton is the guy that you're seeing here. He was a professional soccer player, and he actually gave up his soccer career back in 2014. He volunteered right after the initial invasion in 2014. So despite his youth, he's a 10-year veteran of the war. He's been wounded multiple times, and he has a young family. I still correspond with him on Facebook, and he has beautiful children, young children, and it's just heartbreaking that he needs to be there. This is a therapy program at a horse farm outside of Mykolaiv, and there are a number of these. United Help Ukraine, I know, sponsors one. This is not theirs, but this is a therapy program that these are guys with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries, and it was pretty incredible to see the connection between these guys and these horses. They're unbelievable creatures. So this guy was lost an arm and a leg in Donetsk region. He's undergoing rehab. this young guy was wounded and was just had been in the hospital for a couple of weeks. His roommate, oh, sorry, not this is a young guy and his mother. This is the roommate of the guy you just saw before. This young man's name was Pablo. He lost an arm and a leg, and he was an incredible guy. Actually, he spoke very good English, and he had this. He was just when I came into his room and asked him if I could photograph him. He said sure. He was reading a book. He had a super peaceful energy about him, and if you look at the wall there, these are letters and pictures of him from kids, and what was heartbreaking about this guy is that his previous his job in civilian life, he was a wilderness guide in the Carpathian Mountains, and there's pictures of him, clearly an adventurous soul, just living a fantastic, a life, living a life of something that he was passionate about, which was the wilderness, and now his life is obviously changed in every way, but it's just an example of the sacrifice that the youth of this country are willing to make. Protez Foundation, where limbs are being manufactured and fitted. This is in Kyiv region, or actually in the city of Kyiv. A statistic that I was absolutely blown away by was the young woman that was our host here, said that about 70% of the guys who come in here to be fitted with prosthetics, if they're capable of rejoining their combat units, they do, despite the fact that they're now living with prosthetics. This is the same place. Just a snap that I got in a hospital in Chernihiv.
So I just want to mention here, Allan, just give you a minute to rest a little bit. So we, with Protez Foundation, I hope that people who are here, we're on our second webinar, where executive director and both founders of this organization, Protez Foundation, we're here talking about issues of prosthetics, rehabilitation, and also what you were saying about the numbers. They're growing, unfortunately, and we know that currently there are over 60,000. This is by a very low estimate. So there are 60,000 people with amputations in Ukraine, which is a huge number. And we are partnering with Protez Foundation, and we're hoping to support them further with this in this center in Kyiv, where Allan was photographing those boys. We fully equipped the center with prosthetic manufacturing equipment. So basically, we really wanted to invest, especially in those centers in Kyiv, which is a state-of-the-art center with open doors. Allan, you saw that. This is a great concept with open windows. It's in the center of the city. So with those huge windows, people can see the rehabilitation process and prosthetics process, while those who are getting that treatment can also see outside. And I think this is a great concept, that we have to be very inclusive now and make sure that we provide support to those who gave everything to, for Ukraine, and not only for Ukraine, but the world's democracy as well. But I think this is one of the things that we are very proud to partner with this organization, and we hope to continue supporting those with prosthetics through one of our programs that's called Wounded Warrior.
Thank you. Yes, it was. They had a very, very, very clearly very passionate. The people that were working there were extremely engaged, and everyone that I saw there that was the patients that they were working on, again, such a positive attitude. Everybody there was, I mean, they were smiling, they were laughing. The one guy that I just photographed there that was sitting with his legs, his stump resting on that prosthetic, he and another guy were just fooling around, and they were trying on each other's prosthetics and trying to walk with them even though they were different heights. And it was just, they were just having fun. They were just being kids. It was fantastic to see. This young guy, or this old, sorry, not young, he's not that young. It's a guy called Anton. He was one of the soldiers, one of the wounded warriors. I visited him at his home with his family. Just a great guy. Had lost his leg in Donetsk. So this is a class that is being given to these children in mine awareness. And this was an incredibly difficult experience for me to see these kids in, what looked like just a primary school classroom, kids sitting around, with toys and a overhead projector. The images that were being shown on the projector were images of cartoon images of mines and bombs and just weapons of destruction that these kids had no business knowing about. And it was difficult to sort of wrap my head around the cognitive dissonance of seeing, a cartoon textbook about, mines, about these weapons, so that the danger of what these kids might encounter if they ran across one of these things could be presented in such a way as a 7 or 8-year-old would be engaged and be able to understand it. Incredibly emotionally impactful experience for me, and so necessary for these kids because the mines are everywhere. This couple ran a project out on a farm outside of Kyiv where they are growing and making dried borscht, the Borscht the Zoo project, borscht for the army, providing these packages of dried soup. And they had volunteers from this community came there on a daily basis. This is on that farm, picking vegetables and then drying them and creating these packages of dried soup for the army. This is the Good Bread Bakery, which is a bakery in Kyiv that employs people with developmental disabilities almost exclusively. In fact, the trip before this, when I had been in Chasiv Yar with a volunteer organization that was handing out bread to some of the shelters there, I recognized the bread. It was the bread from this bakery that they had been taken to the front line. So this is a program, the SMUHA program. This woman there is a licensed counselor. She's a child psychologist. This young guy, this was something that was such a, I would never have imagined seeing the impact of the war, creating a situation where this child who was from Bucha, who had seen the invasion and all of the atrocities that happened, had literally the development of his ability to control his body had been affected. He had been so traumatized that he moved in a sort of wooden robotic fashion. His neuromuscular development had been impacted by the trauma. And Julie said that we have to heal his body before we can heal his mind. And she was putting him through these exercises and to try to loosen up his body and try to sort of stimulate his ability to coordinate his limbs. But this is the sort of the damage that's being done that you would never even know about unless you were exposed to it. The fact that these children are literally traumatized to the point where they lose the ability to develop the ability to move their limbs properly. It was just so shocking to me. This is a small town outside of Mykolaiv that I traveled through, and I found myself by accident in following a procession for a young soldier from this town who had been killed. It was a funeral procession, and it was incredibly moving to see the entire main street as they slowly drove this casket that was draped in the Ukrainian flag on its way to be interred. The town turned out by the side of the road. Most people kneeling as the casket went by. Obviously, as you can see, people just were, had been caught, in their bathrobes, whatever, but they all came out to, this young woman was there to, this just display of respect and emotion and grief for a single soldier. This was, again, from that same funeral procession. Just gives you an idea. This is the kind of grief that the death of one young soldier can produce, and magnify that by how many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands across the country. You can sort of get an idea of the level of national grief that the entire country is experiencing because of this invasion. Cemetery in Lviv, just a sea of flags and people coming and going constantly during the course of the day, visiting these graves. And this was on the front lines. I just left we were on our way back to the car to drive back to the town that we were staying in at sunset. This is just one of the soldiers I was with looking at sunset over Donetsk region. And that is that. My intent with these images from the very beginning was to try to capture as best I could images that were emotionally impactful of individuals and situations that people could relate to emotionally. My hope was that people would be sufficiently moved or by these images that would hopefully give people an encounter experience with some of the individuals I photographed, and be sufficiently moved by them to be spurred into action to help hopefully encourage people to do something of tangible good for Ukraine. I fell in love with Ukraine. It is an incredibly beautiful country. The scenery, as I drove, the first time I drove from Lviv down to Odessa through the countryside and saw these massive fields of sunflowers that went on to the horizon. It's just breathtaking in its beauty. Ukraine is a country that I admire and respect for their courage, their resilience, their determination to maintain their own right to determine their own destiny as a nation, not to be subdued. The Ukraine is a unique country in my experience. It straddles east and west in a way that I don't think I've ever seen in any other country, and it's a country that tries to blend as best it can. It's Western and it's Eastern influences. It's a country that was, you could see is trying to find its way in the modern world post-Soviet Union. It is a country that is fiercely proud of its history. The history of Ukraine is alive in Ukraine. It's present in the people and in the culture. You get a very, very tangible sense of the history of Ukraine, despite the fact that it is, a very modern and forward-looking country with with Apple stores and lots of technology and clearly a country with a very modern and very current, a very very an ability to integrate itself into the modern world in a very very productive manner, but yet still keeps its history and its culture alive in a very tangible way also. It's just a tragedy beyond my ability to articulate, that it is forced through no fault of its own. The people of Ukraine are forced to, as I said, to put aside productive civilian lives, peaceful lives, and be forced into to the front lines, to put on uniform, to pick up arms, and to stand in the breach in defense of their right to determine their own destiny. And I live with Ukraine in my head on a daily basis, and I certainly plan to be back as soon as I can make that happen. I'm just find it very, very difficult to stay away from it. I don't know what else I can say other than, it was an honor to be there in partnership with United Help Ukraine. I saw how much their efforts are having a tangible impact in so many different areas. I mean, you've got no idea how many programs this organization is administering and helping. It's seems that there's nothing that's happening on the front or near the front that United Help Ukraine is not involved in providing resources to, and they are to be commended. They are the real heroes, unsung heroes of the war as much as anybody. So I guess, I mean, I'm just rambling now. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much, Allan. It was a wonderful presentation and really striking and powerful, impactful images that you captured really the soul of Ukrainian people in the front lines, in their daily lives, and really what we're going to be seeing, unfortunately, for some time. And we've been seeing, we will be seeing for some time now, as hospitals take care of wounded and amputees, as we see in the streets of major cities, people who lost their homes. They lost everything pretty much. And even here in the US, people come with nothing but their knowledge and dedication to work and then support their loved ones in Ukraine. And everyone who is here, I know, is doing quite a bit to help and support Ukrainian defenders and families who are still in Ukraine surviving. And we just heard, was it the 26th, right, on Monday, another one of the major attacks again everywhere in Ukraine, including Kiev. Earlier in July, we saw a bombing of children's largest hospital, Ahmadid. And so the work continues, and I think it's again, it's our moral duty to do everything in our power, in our ability to support these people. And I'm very grateful for all your work, Allan, because I think through those images, some of us relive those moments where we saw our families escaping through the Polish border. I remember March and those feelings when my parents couldn't get out of Kiev, when Kiev was surrounded by Russians, and how they were evacuating in the train. So, and then crossing the border, and people who were greeting them, and how really grateful we are for those who gave them the refuge. And for your work, and I think it's incredible. And again, I hope we will definitely have Allan's work in DC as a special exhibit. We're working on it. But while we're working on it, his work will be displayed at both galas in New York City and Washington, DC. And you probably will also see his images on our website through our programs. We will use them just to show how to show the devastation, but also the resilience and the beauty and the bravery of Ukrainian people. So, Allan, thank you so much. This is really powerful imagery that left all of us speechless and really emotional, because again, we live through this every day. Our team does here in the US, in Germany, and in Ukraine, and I know many of you do the same, because you have people who are very close and dear to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, the relationship I've developed with you guys is extremely important to me. And I hope it continues long after the war is over and we have a chance to go back and photograph the reconstruction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. If we have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask or put them in the chat, whichever you prefer. If not, thank you all so much for coming. Continue supporting Ukraine. And Allan, again, huge thank you. Very grateful to all of your work and your efforts to showing the world what Ukraine is going through right now.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.